it's important to realize that not all mezuzahs are created equal. Some are more beautiful and more expensive. Some are written quicker and they're cheaper, and therefore there's a lot of sleight of hand in the cheaper mezuzahs. And there's a lot of different aspects of the mezuzah that are affected by the fact that they're being written faster and sloppier, which is why I always encourage people to buy nicer and better mezuzahs and not to look for the bottom of the barrel, the cheapest mezuzah that you can find. So the mezuzah that I'm going to be talking about right now is a mezuzah which you'll find in Judaica stores and even by some soifrim who want to sell a cheaper mezuzah. Now, what's the problem with these mezuzahs? The problems in the mezuzahs are, and I'm going to enumerate them one at a time, and as I talk about what the problems, the potential problems that we'll find in this mezuzah, I'm going to show you different examples that I come across on a daily basis when I'm checking mezuzahs. So the first problem that I'll find in the cheaper mezuzahs is that the letters are not always written properly, which means because they're being written fast, it's easy for there to be sleight of hand. So let's say the cipher has to write Beisecha, so he's writing the Yud, and by mistake he's in such a rush to write it faster so he could sell it for less, right? One thing affects the other. He wrote the Yud too long. So either one or two things happens. Either one is that the Yud is now too long, so long. What's the difference? What is a Yud that's very long? It's a kosher Vav. So if the Yud is written so long it's a kosher Vav, it doesn't say anymore Beisecha, it doesn't say that. Because there's no Yud, it's a Vav. And if it doesn't say the Beisecha, it doesn't say the word that the Torah says needs to be there, automatically the mezuzah can no longer be considered kosher. But aside from there being like problems like that, which make it 100% automatically not kosher and not fixable, a lot of times there'll be a Yud which is a little bit too long, not quite a Vav, not quite a Yud, it's somewhere in the middle, and then we have to do a Shalas Chacham, and we have to do a Shalas Tinnik. These are different ways of verifying the status of mezuzah. We're not going to go into it right now, maybe in another video. But what I'm trying to bring out is that there's a lot of potential problems as far as the shapes of the letters are concerned. And the example that I gave you with a Yud is just one of many. Many, many, many. So the first example that I have over here I want to show you a Yud. Exactly the exact example that we were talking about. So if you look at the Yud of this Yirayishcha, this is a little bit of a different scenario. I'm not going to say that this is automatically a Vav because it has a very much look like a Yud shape, but I wanted to show you the length of the Yud. Look how the length of the Yud is basically the same length as the Saf and the Resh. So that could very likely be a serious problem. Okay, we could all agree that the Yud is not the right length. Another example is here in this word over here is Bachem, but you can see that the Mem is a little bit rounded and could be mistaken for a Samach. Another example here is a Zayin, which is too long. That is a problematic letter because now it could be read as a final Nun. You can see that here this Zayin, too long. The leg is very long. Another example here is a Resh, which is written very small, which next to the Shin it looks like a Yud, but next to the Saf it looks like a Resh. So that's another letter that can be mistaken and not be read properly. Here's another example, a Dalid, where if you don't make the leg in the right place, it could possibly be read and be a kosher Zayin. Here's another classic example. Asher, you can see the Resh is very long. Now the leg is longer than the head. So that is a final Chaf. I could show you these examples all day because I get a lot of cheap mezuzahs to check. I have here a Vav, which is next to the Saf and the Zayin. It looks like a Yud very much. So that's the first problem that I'll find in the cheaper mezuzahs. is just simply the shapes of the letters. The next problem that I'll find in the cheaper mezuzahs is the spacing. Because the mezuzahs are written so fast, there's problems with the spacing of the mezuzah. So, for example, I have some over here. Navshechem. Navshechem is the word I'm going to show you. So, if let's say the word Navshechem, there's a more space. In this instance that I'm going to show you, there's a big space between the Chaf and the Mem of Navshechem. So it's not the word that the Torah says needs to be written in the mezuzah, because it doesn't say Navshechem, it says Navshecha. And then there's a Mem, like seemingly not attached to the word. So, if the word is not there, that the Torah says needs to be there written in the mezuzah, then the mezuzah is no longer considered kosher. Now, because the sefer is going so fast, is sometimes not paying attention how closely he's making one letter to the next, and you'll have these kind of problems. So I'm going to show you now some examples of problems in the spacing of the mezuzah, which could be a problem and affecting the level of kashrus of the mezuzah. Okay, so you could see here, this is what I was talking about, Navshechem. You can see that there's a very big space between the Chaf and the Mem, and that could be a problem. Now, sometimes you'll see like big spaces, and sometimes there'll be less spaces. Look over here, the Mem and the Tzadik, they almost don't even look like they're part of the same word. And you'll see here, throughout this mezuzah, it was written very poorly. And there's a spacing problem here, between the Aleph and the Lamed. And over here, V'shachbucha, the Chaf and the Beis. Eschem, the Chaf and the Mem. This is a classic example of a cheaper mezuzah that has problematic spacing. Now, the spacing is not just that the letters within one word may not be attached to it. Sometimes I'll find like two words which are written too close, so then I can't decipher one word from the next. I can't differentiate, that's a better word, one word from the next, and then they look like one long word, which is not a word that exists, and for that matter doesn't belong in the mezuzah. But that's the second thing that I'll typically find in a cheaper mezuzah, is the spacing is a big problem. In addition to that, very often we'll find like crowns which are missing from the letters, and I'm going to show you an example of that as well. And then also we find letters touching, because they're written so fast. Sometimes the letters are too far apart, and sometimes the letters are too close and they're actually touching, and the letters need to be separate. They can't be touching each other. So here I'm going to show you some examples of letters touching. Sometimes we'll find the letters touching side by side. So if you look, see the Saf is touching the Chaf. As well over here, the Reish is touching the Vav, bumping into the Vav. And actually this one right here is an example that cannot be fixed, because now it says a Ches, no longer a Reish and a Vav. And sometimes we'll find letters touching from one line to the next. Look here, you'll see the Lamed is bumping in and touching into the Hey of the Shem Hashem on the line on top. So I want to show you a classic example of a mezuzah here, where it has a whole slew of different problems, and because there's so many problems or potential problems in these cheaper mezuzahs, that's why I don't sell them. I mean, we're not going to be going into right now talking about the difference between the actual letters that are made right in the cheap mezuzahs, between those letters and the better quality and Mohodim mezuzahs. We're not going to be talking about that, because there are certain details which are missing. We're just talking about the fact that the letter is not written properly in the first place. So there's problems in the shapes of the letters. Forget about the amount of detail that they're missing, which would... basically what I'm saying is that even if these cheaper mezuzahs would, let's say, be brought to me to check, and I do all the fixing, I fix all the spacing, I make sure there's no letters touching, any misshapen letter that I find that could be fixed and verified, I could fix it and verify it, and I give it back to you, it's still not going to be a lechatchila mezuzah or a Mohodim mezuzah, because there's still a lot of detail missing from the actual letters that don't make it possible but take away from other statuses. I'm not going to go into right now that at all. I want to show you now a mezuzah here, cheap mezuzah, where there's so much going on in it. In this mezuzah we have misshapen letters, we have spacing problems, we have letters touching. Okay, so we have here Hayoim, the yod is touching, is bumping into the vav by a slight here. Look how this nun over here only has 2 crowns, doesn't have the 3 crowns. And then again you have a big space between the nun and the saf, right? So all this stuff going on could possibly be read as 2 separate words. What else? What else do we have over here? Let's go make our way down. Look at this bays right here. Okay. Now that might be still considered kosher on some level, but again, we could all agree that it's not made right. Look at these. Look at this one here. This this lamed over here, the head is very short. That is a problem. I have to examine that actually to see. It doesn't look like there's any neck on that lamed. What else do we have over here? Oh, more letters touching here. We have a daled that's written. There's still more head on the left than the right, but again, it's entering almost at a state kind of, no, that doesn't really look like a Zion, but that's a classic example like I showed you earlier, but again, it's not made right. That's the point that I'm trying to show you right here. What else do we have in this mezuzah? Oh, missing crowns here, missing the crowns. What else? Let me see. Oh, more missing crowns right here, missing crowns again. So as you can see, just some of the stuff that I'm pointing out to you here again. Oh, look at this test. It's missing crowns. So that's basically what you're getting in a cheaper mezuzah. So that's why I don't sell them. Well, I should say that's one of the reasons why I don't sell them. There's other reasons also, which we'll go into in another video, why it's important to have good quality and Mahuda mezuzahs. We'll talk about that in another video. But just looking at it and taking it for face value, it's very poorly written.